English Planet. Appunti di inglese, a cura di Nicholas Youldon.
Good evening everybody, and welcome back to another lesson in the series of English Planet. Spend some time on your English with your presenter and English teacher Nick Youldon. Now, last week I was explaining the use of the form of the present perfect. You remember I was saying, have you ever been to New York? Have you ever seen a UFO? Have you ever met an alien? Etc, etc, etc. Okay, this is a form, a time form of the verbs in English, where two time forms, the past and the present, meet together in one form. If I ask the question, have you ever met an alien? I'm asking about your past experience, but including right up to the present. Now I want to explain how using this particular form, the present perfect, can help Italians to resolve a problem which occurs particularly for them when they're trying to express themselves in a certain form or in a particular context. Let me give you an example using Italian. Remembering that I am not an Italian teacher, I'm an English teacher, and so I may be wrong in the way I'm using Italian. But think about this situation for a moment. We have in our lives an event or a condition which started in the past and continues in the present. How do we describe or talk about this in Italian? I believe we say something like: abito a Londra da 5 anni, lavoro in questo ufficio dal 2011. Of course, I may be wrong, but this is what I believe I hear Italian students saying to me. First, let's look at the situation we're describing. The situation here is that a condition, let's say, living in London or working in an office, a condition started in the past at a specified, determined time and continues into the present. Abito a Londra adesso, oppure lavoro nello stesso ufficio anche adesso. Now there are two aspects of this which are of interest to me and to us. Number one is that the form of the verb in Italian is the present simple, abito, oppure lavoro. And the second important thing is that we have to describe, in some way determine, the period of time for which this condition exists. This can be done in two ways. Either we give an initial date, the date when the condition started, or we can give a period of time, intervening time from the start to the present, which describes how long the condition continues. In Italian, this is expressed with da 5 anni oppure dal 2011, ad esempio. But in either case, you use the preposition da to describe or define this period. Now let's see what happens when you try to put this into English using simple translation and how it becomes a mistake. Let's start from the Italian. Abito a Londra da 5 anni. Abito? I live. A Londra. Sì, devo dire in London. I live in London. Ok, da. Allora, da dizionario, controllo per sicurezza. From. Ok, I live in London from. 5 anni? Facile, 5 years. I live in London from 5 years. Perfetto, giusto. Inglese perfetto. No, wrong. Come? Wrong? Come mai? What's the problem? Let's hear what an Englishman would say, or an Englishwoman. I have lived in London for 5 years. We think directly in English. We don't try to translate. This is a classic example of the use of the present perfect. Living in England started 5 years ago and continues now in the present. So, I have lived in London for 5 years. We think and speak directly in English. This is a classic example of the present perfect in English. I have lived, I have worked, I have been, or any other verb in this form mean automatically that a condition or activity, a particular condition or activity, started in the past and continues now in the present. Now we come to the second part of our problem. We have to define or describe the period of time during which the activity or condition exists. For example, I have been in this hotel for 5 hours. I have been in this room for 5 hours. I have been in this hospital for 3 weeks. How boring, what a terrible time I'm having. I feel bad. I want to go home. I want to get out. Here we're describing the period of time as a bad experience, an experience of time. There's something wrong, so we describe it in the correct way, as a period. For 5 hours, for 3 weeks, for 6 months, all of that time. This is relatively simple to translate or represent from Italian to English because da, Italian, is for in English in this case. Da 5 ore, for 5 hours. Da 3 settimane, for 3 weeks. We're interested in the length or duration of the period. Someone wants to know how long or how short, how easy or how difficult this period was. You can also say, I've only been here for 5 minutes. Meaning, sono qui solo da 5 minuti, nessun problema. Everything's fine when we speak about the period of time involved, but it's a little more complicated if we want to speak about the exact time when the activity or condition started. Maybe a policeman wants to interview about a crime you may have participated in, or a taxi inspector needs to know when you first lived in England in order to pay your taxes. If you want to state or specify the exact date of starting the activity or condition, then da is translated as since and not for. It's 10 o'clock and I am still in the hotel. I came to the hotel at 5 o'clock. I have been in the hotel since 5 o'clock. Is that a sufficient alibi, officer? You can see I didn't steal the money from the bank at 9 o'clock. Dear Mr. Tax Inspector, I live in London now. I came to London in 2015. I have lived in London since 2015. How much tax exactly do you want me to pay? As you can see here, the policeman and the tax inspector are very interested in exact details, dates and times. So I have to translate or represent the Italian preposition da as since in English and state the time or date of the condition or activity when they started. I buy one CD by Labgral every year. I bought my first CD in 2015. It's now 2021. So I have now bought 7 CDs by Labgral since 2015. By the way, to avoid any confusion and also to practice your spelling, the word I'm talking about, since, is spelled S-I-N-C-E. Repeat, S-I-N-C-E, since. I have lived in London since 2010. In this case, obviously, I am not talking about me personally. I, personally, have lived in Turin since 1983. What a long time. To test your knowledge of English numbers and mathematics, I'll ask you a very quick question. How long have I lived in Turin? Repeat. How long have I lived in Turin? Yes, while we're on the subject, you should also remember to practice your numbers occasionally. Practice counting, for example. As I said in previous lessons, spelling in English is very important, so you should practice the alphabet in English. You remember I told you about the vowels A, E, I, O, U. You remember the first part of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If you practice these things, it will be very useful for you. The same thing applies to numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Practice the numbers. It may seem stupid, it may seem easy, but in reality it's something you should practice. If you finish up, if you find yourself in a taxi, for example, in London, and the taxi driver asks you for a sum of money, then you need to know exactly what sum of money you have to pay. Otherwise, you could pay a lot of money extra. If the cab driver in New York asks for $30, vuole 13 o $30 per sua tariffa. That 2-week stay in New York may become very expensive if you don't know exactly how much they're asking you to pay. I'll tell you a little secret if you want. The difference between 13 e 30 in English is 13, 13, 30, 30. If you pay attention, you'll see that the difference is an accent. 13, 30, 13, 30, 14, 40, 15, 50. All of those numbers between 11 and 20, well, in fact from 13 to 20, they have the accent on the second part. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Whereas those numbers with tens, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, etc., they have the accent on the first part. 30, 40, 50. That's how to avoid confusion between 13 e 30, 14 e 40, e 19 e 90, which is a very big difference. Notice also the simple way we have of saying or pronouncing the years. Traditionally, in the past, they have been divided into two separate numbers. 1986, 1986. 1999, 1999. For non-English people, this is an unusual way to say dates, but for us it's quite simple, quite practical, and quite useful. 1999, 1756. In 1492, America was discovered by Christopher Columbus. I don't believe it. Let's say in 1492, America was invaded by the Europeans. When the millennium arrived, we had a year 2000, which was impossible to separate into two numbers, so we called it 2000. But now gradually we have reverted to our old system. So now we have 2010, 2015, 2020 and 2021. This year is 2021 and this has been commonly democratically agreed by the majority of English people who now say happily 2021 and not 2021. And by the way, looking at the clock, I see it's approximately 10:15. Time to interrupt for a short publicity advertising break. Stay tuned to English Planet. I'll be right back.
Meditazione planetaria del martedì. Radio Dreamland si unisce all'iniziativa della meditazione planetaria del martedì sera, organizzata dal New Earth Circle. Ogni martedì sera, alle 21, vi invitiamo a partecipare alla meditazione planetaria dedicata a Madre Terra e a tutti i suoi figli di qualsiasi specie. Ognuno può unirsi al cerchio planetario dei meditanti, partecipando da soli o con i propri cari, per una testimonianza di pace e di spiritualità che abbracci tutto il pianeta, per un atto d'amore verso Madre Terra, per un mondo antispecista. Unitevi con noi in meditazione, seguendo la Nassinar, la musica del vuoto eseguita al flauto da Giancarlo Barbadoro. Ogni martedì alle 21. Per informazioni www.newearthcircle.org. Radio Dreamland. Share the vision.
Okay, back again in the studio. This is still English Planet, part 2, a sort of exercise to test your capability for listening to English. The aim of Radio Dreamland is to bring a little bit of friendship, entertainment and happiness to the world, and to create something, add to the revolution of eco-spirituality. This evening I'd like to take you on a short journey to express what eco-spirituality gave to me and take you for a journey, as I say, a spiritual journey from England, Scotland, Piedmont, as far as Bolivia and Peru. Let's start when I was just a very little boy studying assiduously at my primary school. My teachers told me about a place, a wonderful place it seemed to me, went by the name of Lake Titicaca. I paid attention to my teachers and to the lesson. I was very intrigued about this Lake Titicaca, which seemed a very, very long way away from England, and I didn't ever imagine that I would ever see Lake Titicaca. But it continued to remain in my mind. I don't know, through all of my life, various references to this lake continued to reappear. As I got older and became more independent from my parents, I began to move around by car with my friends. I visited nearby places such as Glastonbury and Stonehenge, or even faraway places such as Scotland. At the time, these didn't have much significance to me. They were places more or less interesting. But maybe my adolescent or teenage mind at the time was more focused on the girls that I can meet in these places than in what other aspects of the places were on offer. However, Glastonbury, Stonehenge and Scotland are all places with more spiritual interest than economic or tourism interest, and it's quite likely that a seed was planted inside of me as I visited them. The strange thing is that I visited all of these places without having any particular aim, intention or dream of visiting them, any more than I might have had a dream of visiting Lake Titicaca. I simply found myself in these places. But evidently the experience remained inside of me. As an Englishman brought up in a Celtic area of Britain, I had no aim or ambition ever to live in Italy. But at a certain point in my life, I did feel what they call wanderlust, a desire to move, to see a different country. To tell the truth, part of this was the effect of having a girl on my mind. But that's not the only reason, and there are very other important reasons why I eventually finished working in Germany and then later went to Sweden and studied languages. All of these things were evidently part of an experience which was growing inside of me and which I was not personally very much aware of. But they were obviously all part of a process which eventually brought me to Piedmont, to Turin. As I say, I had no ambition or idea or intention to live and work in Italy, but I found myself doing precisely that. I found myself living and working in Turin, Piedmont. What happened in Turin and the valleys of Piedmont which changed my life effectively was that I met eco-spirituality. Actually, eco-spirituality didn't exist when I arrived in Turin, but I met the person who founded it, Giancarlo Barbadoro, and his colleague and life companion, Rosalba Natero. And I was fortunate enough to witness, to even participate in the founding of Eco-Spirituality Foundation. Now, the experience of eco-spirituality which I acquired in Turin helped me or enabled me to redefine my past experiences of life. They showed me, for example, that I was not just an ordinary Englishman. I came from a part of England that was extremely Celtic, so I was effectively born and brought up as a native European, part of an indigenous population. I also understood quickly that Piedmont is the same thing. Piedmont actually has a great Celtic tradition, and many of the people of the population of Piedmont are part of a native European indigenous population. I realized also that Scotland was not simply a cold and distant part of Britain where the men wear women's clothes, but in fact they were my cousins, part of a Celtic nation and another part of an indigenous population. Important to note here that Eco-Spirituality Foundation were partly inspired on an experience of Scotland, a community which was living in the area near Inverness, which was visited by Giancarlo and Rosalba when they were thinking of trying to set up Eco-Spirituality Foundation. Glastonbury for me was no longer just a boring village to visit on a Sunday afternoon, but became an important spiritual and cultural centre that has lasted over thousands of years and made a contribution to human society in that part of England, in that part of the world. Stonehenge for me is no longer just a tourist place to visit, not far from London, but it has now become a significant spiritual centre known by people all around the world and visited by people from all around the world. The time I spent, the short time, let's say, living in Sweden, in Stockholm, was no longer just a curiosity, but was a period spent living in a society in close contact with nature. And not just nature in terms of forests and trees and lakes and sea, but nature in a much on a much grander scale, on a cosmic scale. something which made you feel you were part of existence, able in contact with the stars, with the sky, able to go beyond the horizons of our planet. In a certain sense, this for me represents the essence of eco-spirituality. Human society needs to live with respect for and in close contact with nature on this planet, but also with one eye on existence and the situation of ourselves and the planet within existence in general. Ecology and spirituality combined. Now, what about Lake Titicaca? Something still always at the back of my mind, never forgotten, but never an active part of my life. I had no plan, no ambition, no dream to move in that direction, but one day my wife said, let's go to Peru. And I sort of said, well, yeah, sounds like a good idea. We can go and see Machu Picchu. That would be fun. It was something more or less like that. Until one day, shortly afterwards, I found myself sitting on the shores, not only on the shores, but on an island in the middle of Lake Titicaca. We have to be careful how we pronounce that name because it has unfortunate repercussions in Italian, not in English. But it was partly because of its strange name, I think, that it remained in my mind, in my head. But not only, there was something, some extra overtones which mean that I never forgot the story of Lake Titicaca in my school days. When you visit this lake, it's easy to appreciate, to understand that it is a very special, a sacred lake. It's bordered both by Peru and Bolivia and has been the center of civilizations, advanced civilizations for thousands of years. In recent history, when the Spanish arrived here in the 1500s, it was a center also of the Inca civilization. But a long time before that, it was an important cultural, economic and spiritual center for what is known as Tiwanaku civilization. What I remember from my school lesson a long time ago is that it is a very special lake because it's the highest lake in the world, but also because it contains salt water. It's not a freshwater lake, meaning that one time in the past it was a sea and not a lake. This is very important to bear in mind because the lake now is isolated at very high altitude in the Andes Mountains. But archaeology and anthropology both give connections with international worldwide civilizations. For example, boats found on Lake Titicaca, modern boats, are similar to what were used in Egypt during the Egyptian civilization 4,000 years ago. There have also been or are signs of a connection between the Sumerian people, the dawn of civilization in the Middle East, also 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. So the civilizations in the remote past around Lake Titicaca obviously were connected to other civilizations in the world. The nearest important structural site is just about 20 kilometers, I believe, from the shores of the lake, which is now in the territory of Bolivia. This is what is known as the center of Tiwanaku, the center which has the same name as the civilization on which was based around, which inhabited the area. This enormous monumental site now, as I say, is about 20 kilometers, maybe less, from the water of the lake. But this is because of geological changes over time. And obviously, in the past, this large structure was effectively on the coast, was on the sea, and therefore reachable within contact for other civilizations who may have traveled by sea. As I say, now the lake, as well as the archaeological structures of Tiwanaku, are isolated at altitude, isolated in the mountains. But Tiwanaku is acknowledged as a site of worldwide archaeological and historical importance. It is protected by UNESCO, and it is studied and researched to a great extent in order to find out more about, again, a lost civilization which was based in that area in the long distant past. What is interesting and reassuring for me is that the head of the team, the UNESCO team, which is responsible for research and protection work on the Tiwanaku site, declared in 2018, in 2018, declared that they are working very closely with the indigenous populations. This is important for me because both in Bolivia, in this region, and in Peru, there are important indigenous populations which are still in existence even after decades or centuries, of Spanish domination. The indigenous populations are still alive and strong and vital. In terms of eco-spirituality, but also important for human civilization in the future and in the present, human society, the importance of indigenous peoples with their contact with nature and their philosophy of life is considered to be very, very important. A curiosity here regarding the site at Tiwanaku, there is an Aymara. The Aymara people are the indigenous people in that area. They have a legend which says that their ancestors concealed the most emblematic monument of Tiwanaku in the Puerta del Sol. The Puerta del Sol, it is the gate of the sun. This is a part of the monument which is still available for visiting on the site, and it is very much photographed. However, they concealed a secret. The Aymara legend, their ancestors concealed a secret, which was an important secret that would save humanity when it reached the brink of the abyss. The brink of the abyss means the edge of the abyss. In other words, when humanity is in serious danger, there is an Aymara secret hidden in the gate of the sun which can help humanity to survive. Unfortunately, once again, time has run out. Safe in the knowledge, though, that the Aymara people can help me and us in a moment of need. I will leave you once again. Please tune in again next week to Radio Dreamland and English Planet. This is your presenter, Nick Youldon, wishing you a very pleasant evening. And remember to share the vision. Good night.